Good afternoon. We're really pleased that you could join us on this webinar on youth and the beloved community. This webinar is designed to provide information, give examples, and allow for a dialogue on racial reconciliation and youth within our Episcopal Church community and for the wider community. We hope that our presenters will provide food for thought, information, and resources that may be useful as you continue your work. And we're very proud to have with us today a stellar cast of experts in their areas. And first, we'll start with the Canon Christopher Brathwaite, who is the head of our beloved community commission here in the Diocese of Central Florida. Next, we'll have two innovative instructors, Ms. Sally Ulray and Ms. Katie McCree, who have developed the Dismantling Racism curriculum for the Absalom Jones Center in Atlanta, and are also with the Diocese of Atlanta. Next, we'll have Mr. Joshua Joseph, who is the director of Camp Wingman, a year-round camp and retreat center here in Orlando, Florida. And last, we'll have one of our youth, Mr. Avery Lewis, who will talk about his experiences as a young person of faith and someone who is dedicated in his young life to working towards faith and racial reconciliation. So with that, we are very glad that you've chosen this time to join us, and we hope that if you have comments, that you will send it to us, and that is to Dr. John Robertson, and at drjohnr1@bellsouth.net. And you'll also see our information at the end of this broadcast. Thank you and enjoy.
I'm the Reverend Canon Christopher E. Brathwaite. I am a retired priest in the Diocese of Central Florida, but I do some work in churches that have lost a priest and is in the throes of looking for a new priest. What I do is called interim work in parishes. In addition to that, I head up the Anti-Racism Commission, which we have coined a new name, Becoming Beloved Community. I find this to be a very interesting avenue to use my life experiences, my work in ministry, and just to get people to understand the love of Christ in a different dimension than just not bringing people together. The whole idea is togetherness. I, however, have taken the take of youth and how we can incorporate youth into the thinking of loving one another and bring down some of the barriers that divide us. I recently wrote a book on the subject of becoming beloved community with the subtitle of Know Me, Love Me, Teach Me. The whole tenor of the book is trying to get families to sit at the dinner table together and talk to one another, parents hearing their children, children hearing their parents and having lively, spirited, and healthy conversations about the landscape in which we find ourselves. I think that the mission for me right now is is really the youth and how churches that have schools and academies attached to them should really be more embracing of these young children, because these children are bright, they're smart, they're intelligent, and they're looking for guidance from us older folks. They know a lot of stuff, and we too can hear from them. They have something to teach us. And if we are listening and listening keenly, they would teach us some things that we ought to know, and vice versa. I don't believe that someone brings a child into this world to fail, but the pressures of society come down on people like white on rice. And each parent try to do their best. However, because of the seemingly rat race, to use a phrase, that we live in, we don't pay enough attention to those things that need to be paid attention to. Like, for instance, we allow our kids to grab something and go and sit in a corner with a sandwich in one hand and an iPhone in the next. And even people in the same household, they're texting each other. That is not healthy for family. That's not healthy for raising a family. There must be conversation. Thus, my book. I believe that if we can get back to some of the things that we have grown up with, it would be helpful. And one of the institutions that try to help parents is Camp Wingman. Camp Wingman is an Episcopal institution down in Avon Park that we bring kids together from different levels in schools and put them together. And it seems to be a place like we call it an incubator for bringing kids of all different races and colors together and teaching them some of the finer points of life. For instance, I was brought up in a large family, and whether we couldn't fit at the table, but we all were in the same room when it come to dinner time, because my father always had something to say to my mother and vice versa. And while we were not necessarily included in the conversation, we heard the conversation. And I do believe from those conversations have made the 10 of us smarter kids, because we learn how to navigate some of the contours of life. And we feel very much included, and we feel that we were treated fairly, because we have an opportunity now to make better choices than some of the people that we grew up with. So if we can get back to some of those basics of us sitting down together and eating together, going to church together, and doing more things together, we would try to eradicate this label that is placed on us. When we were children, we did things to please our parents. Now, I think we parents try to do things to please our children, which is not bad, but there are parameters in which we should operate. There are parameters that we should be able to raise our children. And we must understand that no is a complete sentence. We don't believe that no is a complete sentence, so we want to say no to our children for something that we know we can't provide them, but we have a whole dialogue of explaining it to them And while explaining it to them, the children are telling us and teaching us and guiding us to the decision that they want, not the decision that we have in our mind for them. Thus comes the problem.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, my name is Katie McCree, and this is Sally Ulrey, and we are the writers for the Dismantling Racism Youth Curriculum. And we are excited to tell you a little bit about the materials that we have created in connection with the Absalom Jones Center. And yeah, so we're excited to tell you about that.
It'll be fun. We sort of were invited into this work. It wasn't something that we were currently working on. We're both youth ministers in the Diocese of Atlanta and write curriculum for youth. For youth ministers to use as Sunday school lessons or whatever. And so we had already been doing that when we were approached. Dr. Catherine Meeks at the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing wanted to do something with youth. And so we were recruited, not because we know so much about racism or dismantling it, but because we know how to take concepts and sort of creatively teach youth about them. So we were invited into this work, and we sort of took our own journey, doing lots of research and working on our own unconscious biases and all those kinds of things, and through that created this curriculum.
Right. And so really this work is an extension of the work of Dr. Catherine Meeks, who is in charge of the Absalom Jones Center. And she has kind of, she's been in the Diocese of Atlanta for a good chunk of time, and came to the diocese with the energy to make some changes to the way that we were doing our work around not just racial reconciliation at the time, but kind of Sally, you can help me speak to this, the
training.
The trainings, thank you. But what were they called?
They, Seeing the Face of God in Each Other
is
the manual that the Episcopal Church had put out previously. And she really wanted to make it, not that that's bad, it's actually a great resource. If you've never looked at it, it's totally free online at the Episcopal Church. But she really wanted to root it in not what we were against, but what we were for, and creating the beloved community, and just really grounding the work in our baptismal covenant. So she sort of revamped all those trainings and did some really, really good things that we're seeing a lot of fruit from that in our diocese.
Thank you. I forgot the name of that program, and Sally's got a better memory than me, so thank you. But yeah, so we were invited as an extension of that work, again, because kind of our passion and our skills lie in creating curriculum that translates well to youth. And we were both really excited to do that. And I'll speak for both of us a little bit that we feel so blessed that we were invited to be a part of this work, because it has helped us wake up to a lot of things that we were blind to. And, you know, my hope is that that will continue. As we continue to do this work, I will keep looking at myself and saying, Katie, you have some work to do. So, so we, you know, when we go on this journey, we are on it with you. And I think that's one of the really beautiful parts of the curriculum, is that we assume nothing of the youth, and really even a little bit of the trainers, but really nothing of the youth when they are walking into the room and starting this. Like, we start from the very beginning, so that, you know, if you are brand new to these conversations, that you won't be completely lost. And so really what we've done is created a curriculum that follows just kind of the arc of the gospel. So we start with what God created and what was intended in that creation, which was something beautiful and perfect, and how we were supposed to relate to each other. And then we talk about how we messed it up, how we didn't do what God wanted, and kind of the consequences for that. And of course, specifically as it relates to racial relationships, and just how we've broken that, and how we've not been good to each other. And then we at the end, we come back around and talk about, how can we repent from those things, and how can we repair the damage that we've done and start to reconcile some of those things. So it's what role do we get to play in that? Like, God has invited us to be a part of that through Jesus. And so it's just a full arc, like a lot of times it is with different youth programs. So we follow that pattern. So
Yeah. And then specifically, our curriculum consists of 6 lessons. And the very first one has to do with creating a covenant, because we know that sometimes these conversations, people sometimes have anxiety about having these conversations. And so we want to create a space where we can have courage and be brave and have those conversations. Mm-hmm. So that's the first lesson really is about that.
And the other thing we do in the first lesson is we have videos available in every single lesson. So if there's some stuff that you don't feel comfortable leading as, if you're kind of new to the work, or you're still working through your own, just process of that, there's videos that you can show, but we include stories from people who have already began the work of dismantling racism in their own lives. And there's examples of people making mistakes and it being kind of messy, but that they can be brave and push through it and get to the other side of it. So we are creating a covenant in that first lesson, but we're also giving the youth permission to get their hands dirty and know that they can keep going.
And not be perfect, and realize that they're still learning, and they might say the wrong thing, and they might, learn to do better. And so that's all okay, because it's a learning process.
Right. And then in the second lesson is when we get into what God intended. This is probably our favorite lesson, because it's all just the happy parts. It's so fun to think about being made in the image of God. But we talk about it and we compare it to God being an artist, and we're God's artwork. And it's really a fun lesson, and we kind of go through all these different types of art and talk about how art is a reflection of the artist. And in the same way that there's so many different types of art in the world, there are so many different types of people, because God is vast. Like, God's goodness is vast. And so there's no way that we could have one type of person and still be a reflection of God. So it takes lots of different types of people and lots of different types of cultures. And so we embrace all of those things and challenge them to think about how when we talk about people being different, sometimes that's uncomfortable for us. And we will say things like, oh, I'm colorblind, or everyone's the same to me, when in reality that's denying part of who someone is. And of course, we talk through that throughout the lesson. We don't start at that part, because that can be a hard concept to wrap your head around, but it's a really fun lesson. And I think most of the youth leave feeling, really positive about like what God's intention was when we were created.
And one of the other things about our curriculum as a whole is that every single lesson gives them a practice. Like, if somebody says, oh, I'm colorblind, well, how do you respond to that in a way that's gracious, but also steers them maybe towards some different language and a different understanding of treating people fairly, but also seeing the beauty of their diversity. So every lesson has something that they practice, so that they walk away with tools to have conversations in the real world. That's really what we're hoping for. And we've noticed that a lot of, at least secular trainings about diversity, tend to stop here. They stop and they just celebrate the diversity, and they're like, yay, pat yourself on the back, we're good. But we keep going.
Yes, yeah, because that's what it is to be faithful, is to say, well, this is what we were hoping for. We didn't do what we were supposed to. So like, now what is the consequence of that? So the third lesson is really the history of racism in America, and specifically the relationships between white and Black people. And so, that's one of the places that we will have to grow moving forward, is including, more different minority groups in that history piece. But when we started this, again, it was an extension of Dr. Catherine Meeks's work, and we had to start somewhere, so that's where we started. And frankly, it's enough to start with. It's enough to like talk about. There's going to be plenty to talk about, but we create a timeline, and there will be some things on the timeline that the youth have probably heard of before, or I hope they've heard of it by the time they're in middle school and high school, but maybe not. But we also include some things that they might be completely unaware of, and we lay it out in a way that we're not putting our opinions on top of things in the beginning. We're just saying this is what happened, this is when it happened, and you can't, in a way that you can't really argue it, like it's a piece of history. And then we start to tie in, well, what does that mean for us today, and how is that reflected in our society today? And we also have a piece where we talk about how we take time to consider where have we seen prejudice and racism in our own lives, like not necessarily that we were the perpetrators, or maybe we were, but where have we witnessed it? So maybe you were just listening to a conversation, or you saw something on TV, or read something, anything like that. Like, where have you witnessed that? And we use that as a way to talk about, like, yes, our history is so messy, and there's lots of things in our history that we're ashamed of, and we acknowledge it, but what we also have to acknowledge is that it is still happening today, and that the reason it's happening today is because we have built hundreds and hundreds of years of just a mess, and we haven't worked on it. We've just let it be, and we've made some changes. Obviously, we've come a long way than where we were 400 years ago, but we are nowhere near done. And so, again, we use that as a way to talk about, like, we haven't completed the work, and it's still very much a part of our society, and we can't move on from that hurt until we talk about it, and until we acknowledge it and do the work of correcting it. It's still just going to sit there and be making us sick.
Yeah, so that's lesson 3. And again, we'll continue to add to that, contextualize it for different minority groups, but we start with really the relationship between Black and white people. And that history leads us into the consequences. How we are fallen leads us into the consequences of that fall, that fallenness. And one of the consequences, lesson 4, is about white privilege, and how this system has created the fact that some people have unearned advantages and some people have unearned disadvantages. And what does that actually look like? So we talk about race from the perspective of white culture, like white privilege, majority culture, and then we look at it again from the perspective of minorities. So lesson 5 is about internalized oppression and believing those lies that our culture tells us about what makes someone valuable, particularly when it comes to skin color, and what the effects of internalized oppression are. So the lessons 4 and 5 are looking at race from 2 different perspectives there. And we look at the consequences of this system that historically has been set up for hundreds of years, and it still has consequences for us today. We're still feeling those effects and what they are. And then finally we move into lesson 6, which has to do with reconciliation. But Dr. Meeks really likes the order of repentance, healing, and then reconciliation. So we can't just move into let's just feel better and everything will be fine, until we talk about repentance and what needs to happen for healing. So we look there at what the prophets did, and that sometimes, these youth, they inherited this system. They didn't create it. They're not necessarily the ones who are trying to be racist, but they've inherited this system, and so they still have a responsibility to call it out as wrong, and to name that as sin, the way that it's still messed up, and they still have a responsibility to turn from that and to take steps toward healing and making it right in justice. And so there's an order there too, and we look at some examples of modern day reconciliation work that happened, and we have videos. Again, as Katie mentioned, almost every lesson has videos that help show illustrations or help teach different parts, or so we give you lots and lots of resources in the curriculum. But that last one, it is about how do we with God's help, how do we help make this better? But there's a lot of steps that happen before we can just say, oh, we're done, everything's better. And repentance being one of those. So.
Yeah. And also in that last lesson, we talk a little bit about how in our diocese specifically, we have not always risen to the occasion of confronting racism the way that we should as people who love God. And so we talk about that specifically, how it has looked here. And of course, there's also the opportunity for you to bring in some history of the church in your area. But the framework is there for you to add that in, and it would be a pretty simple project for you to put that away that would be really clear for the youth in your diocese.
Yeah, we don't look just at the world, we look at the church too, and how we haven't always gotten it right, and we need to confess and repent. And we view all of these lessons, like those are the 6 lessons, but we really view this as the starting point. Like this is just laying a foundation for all these concepts and giving the youth some tools to have some conversations, but it's really the starting point of this work. Like once you finish it, you have not arrived, but it's part of working out our faith every day, that this is a lifelong journey of discipleship. Racial reconciliation and healing and justice work is lifelong, and it's tied to our baptismal covenant that we do every day.
Mm-hmm. And so really, again, like Sally said, this is the start for the youth, and maybe for us as well, maybe for us as leaders. But so it's our hope that the youth will wake up during this process, begin to wake up. One of the things that Dr. Meeks talks about is that no one is woke. People are not woke. We're in the process of waking up. So you're continually going through this and waking up every day, hopefully every day, a little bit more. And so if we can wake our kids up, our youth, wake them up a little bit by the end of this, by the end of the series, then hopefully that will motivate them to do some more work. And so we do give some ideas in the curriculum of how you might do more work as a youth group to actually now make some changes. Like, okay, my heart has changed. I have more head knowledge. What can I do about that to change the world around me? But we also, encourage you, which in the last lesson, we have a way that we've guided you through it, to get the youth to come up with some ideas. And what we have found is that youth have some really good ideas. And so, and some of those ideas might play out as they get older, but some of them might play out right now. And so for me, that has been so encouraging. I'm like, okay, this is something like the youth they wanted it. And for me, as we have done this, as we did the research, and as I continue to look into things, like I was telling Sally, I was just watching a documentary with my husband last night, and we're both all like fired up again. It's like, how like it has to change me now. Like I didn't even know I was asleep, and now it's just like waking me up. And so yes, we have seen that change in our youth, and would hope that it will change even not just the way they live their lives personally, but how they talk to people and how the youth group maybe interacts with people. And we heard of one youth group recently that they completely changed the way that they were like approaching their ministry because of after going through the series. Like they're like, oh, we're going to refocus on what we're doing because it just doesn't make sense anymore. So it was really impactful for them.
Yeah, we have and in my personal experience, youth are so ready for this and are so willing and so open to having these conversations. One of the things that we did together, one of the youth made a comment that this is the first time they had a conversation about race and reconciliation in the church that she'd ever been to. And just how refreshing that is, because they know that something is wrong, but they don't really know the language around that or how to talk about it or what to do. And so we found that this is a great jumping off point for having these conversations and starting on that journey, and that youth are really hungry for it.
Yeah, it's like your gut knows something is wrong, but you can't quite pinpoint what it is, and it's like, oh, that's it, that's what it was, it's not right. So we've been really encouraged by the response that we've had to it, And we've had several groups do it more than one time with their group. One question that's come up recently with someone, I think at our last training, was would you envision that you would do this exact same curriculum every single year? And honestly, I wouldn't see it happening that way, but I could see it on a rotation every couple of years. But it might affect how you use your time in the years that you're not doing the curriculum. It is a 6-part series, which we've talked about. So obviously, there's no way that's going to take you through a whole school year of lessons unless you do things much differently than we do. But so, obviously it would just be a chunk of time that you're using it.
Right. We also get asked sometimes if adults can use it. And so we're like, go for it. Try it, see what happens. And so several groups have and that has been successful as well.
Yeah. And we had someone suggest, well, could our youth do the program and then do it for their parents? And I think that would be really cool. I don't think that we haven't had anyone actually do that yet. So if anyone does it, we'd love to hear about it, how it goes. But like, because it's like, could you imagine learning from your child? It's like you have to listen because it's your child. I love it. Anyways, so we're, we get excited about how it may be used in a way that we haven't thought of yet, and just people being creative with it. So then the question is, well, how do you get it? How can you get this curriculum? And so I'm going to let Sally share a little bit about that. Are you cool to share about that? Okay.
So one of the things that, I don't know if you guys are Office fans, The Office, but Michael Scott, there's one clip from The Office where Michael Scott, the well-intended manager, tries to do his own diversity day training, and it's just disastrous and it's actually damaging. And so one of the things about how to get this curriculum is we just do not want to do Michael Scott Diversity Day. We don't want to be well-intended and yet cause damage. We want to do this work well and with intention and with a lot of knowledge and skill, so that it's well done. And so how to get the curriculum is you have to go to 2 trainings before you can teach the curriculum with a group. And the first training is a dismantling racism training. That training is mandated by the national church. Most dioceses have a training program with their own trainers. If you don't, you can always contact the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing. Their training is really good and they do travel, so they can come and do one for you. But that standard training is for adults to start to work on their internal selves and start to look at racism and their unconscious biases and how they've internalized lies about race and inferiority and superiority and like all those things. That's the standard training for adults, and they have to go through that. Then once you do that and you sort of start working on yourself, then you come to a curriculum training and we teach you, or we actually have another trainer too, so it could be one of us or it could be someone else, and we teach you how to use the curriculum, how to use the activities, because some of the things that are written in the book, it just makes more sense if you see it done. And so you come to a training and you learn sort of all the nuances and ins and outs and how to do it and logistics, and then we give you a book. Right. So yeah.
And there's also a student journal that goes along with the curriculum, and so you would order one student journal for each of your students that's participating, and there's a page in the student journal, there's a page for like each activity or conversation that we have, so that they can track their own progress. And there might be times when they're having some thoughts that are really strong and important, but maybe not comfortable to say it out loud. So it would give them a space to write that down. And the other reason we do it that way, and that we haven't discussed yet, is one of the things that is in the curriculum and we see as something that must be done, not just a suggestion, but something that should definitely be done if you use this curriculum, is you need to have a parent meeting before you get started. Because we don't want parents to feel like they're not invited to be a part of this conversation, or that we're tricking them somehow, or we just want to be completely transparent. And so in that parent meeting, you will share a lot of the information that we have just shared with you, as well as maybe things that are just really particular to your group, and you address some of the concerns that we have seen come up several times already, and all of those things. There's an outline in the curriculum of how to have that parent meeting. We give you all the tools that you need, but that way, even with the journal, can play a role in that, because then when the youth go home, if their parents say to them, well, what did you talk about? Not necessarily that they would go, well, here, read my journal, but the youth can open their journal and be like, oh, well, first we talked about this, then we talked about this, this, and this. And so again, it's just very transparent. And if there's one piece that maybe if you just saw one piece, it would feel, you know, oh, well, where did that come from? But if you can track how we got there, it makes good sense. And so it just, we did our best to like fit it together in a way that was going to be really important and get the work done, but in a way that is also, it's undeniable that this is a conversation we need to have, and taking the time to do it the right way, so that no one can deny that this is really the conversation that we need to be having. And so we're really excited about it. We're proud of our little bit of work that we've done, and we love sharing it with people. So if you have any questions, or if you wanted to connect with us to get that information, we will be sharing our contact information with all of our good friends now from this webinar. And you can also go to the Diocese of Atlanta, the Episcopal Diocese of Atlanta website. Do you know that?
Yeah, it's EYCDIOATL.org. And if you click on curriculum, or first you click on youth workers, and then there's like a menu, and you go to curriculum. That's one of the options, is the Dismantling Racism curriculum.
Yeah, so you can fill out a form there that will come to us, and we will contact you and set up a phone call and all that sort of stuff. But again, just know if you're interested, we are so committed to doing this the right way that it takes a while. So so if you're excited about this and you're thinking, man, I would love to do this in October, send us an email today, or in the next couple of weeks, so we can go ahead and get started on it and make sure that you are fully equipped when you're ready to do it in October. If you're hoping to do this for spring break, you might need to wait till the next spring break. But we will get you there. And if it's a conversation worth having, it's going to be worth having whenever you have it. So we want to make sure that we equip you the right way, and we're excited to partner with you.
Yeah. So, thanks for your time. Yes. We're excited to share this work with you. We are excited to hear about all the work that you're doing too.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Joshua Joseph, actually, and because I have two first names, everybody here at camp calls me JJ for short, so they don't get confused with Joshua or Joseph. I am the camp director here at Camp Wingman. I've been here about 2 years now. However, I've been working here at Camp Wingman since 2006 as a summer camp counselor, then as assistant director, until I eventually worked my way up, and now I'm the full-blown director at Camp Wingman. Yeah, so our program began all the way back in 1928. It all started just as the diocese just deciding that they wanted to have something for the kids to do, so they created this week-long camp or retreat event almost, that they took a lot of the kids from the diocese. They had a blast. They thought it was great, so they said we had to do it again and again and again. And it kept growing until finally it got so big. They said we need to have somewhere permanent where we can go and do this every single year. And that's when they purchased the property that we're on now, back in 1939, and they named it Camp Wingman after the two bishops of the time, Bishop Wing and Bishop Mann, and that's how we got our name. And Camp Wingman ever since then has just been a real staple for youth ministry here in the Diocese of Central Florida, and it's been that way since 1939 all the way up until about the 70s. And around the 70s is when the ministry kind of got shaken up a little bit, some leadership issues, and from there the camp was sold off to another religious organization, and then sold off to a rehabilitation center, still a Christian organization, and it's still focused on youth. It helped youth kind of get rehabilitated before it was then kind of abandoned for a little while. And what's so great about Camp Wingman is even through that kind of interesting history in its life, it was an alumni from back in the 60s who came back and saw the camp in the state that it was in and said, I remember the great times that I had here. I remember how impactful it was for me and in my life. And I want that impact to happen in the lives of youth in our diocese as long as it can. So with their own money out of their own pockets, risking so much, putting businesses and homes as collateral to purchase this camp. They purchased it back in 1999, rehabilitated it, and has grown it to where it is right now, as being one of the premier youth destinations for the students in the Central Florida Diocese to come and grow in their faith and kind of search out Jesus in a safe environment. One of the interesting things about Camp Wingman, as far as racial reconciliation is concerned, is I don't think that it was, it's always kind of been a part of its DNA. When we have a photo in 1955 of students taking a group picture, but like we do every week or every session that we have here at camp, is still the same tradition. We have a big group picture of all of our participants. And back in 1955 and even earlier, but we just have that photo as kind of the furthest back we can go, they began integrating their camp sessions. So you see both white and black all in the same photo together, when other camps in other parts of the country weren't doing that same thing. So Camp Wingman has always kind of been a part of this whole thing where they've been wanting to they recognize that there was a wrong, that there was an ill in us trying to create this division amongst the people of God. And from a very early time, they started saying, we need to fix that. And they've been a part of that ever since. And there's people in the diocese now who have talked to me and they remember their experiences at Camp Wingman as an African-American individual, and how impactful it was, and how they remember that, when everybody else was kind of showing them hate, they came over here and they felt like they had a space to be within our diocese. And I thought that was really, really cool. And there's nothing explicit that they do, they're not doing rallies or doing any protest or anything out there that's really that people will look at and say, okay, look at these guys, they're doing something. But they do these little things, these subtle things. And honestly, even now, just me being the director is an example of those subtle things. They're not looking at skin color, they're not looking at anything else but simple, but ability. They have exactly what it takes to do what we need them to do, and all that other stuff doesn't matter. So it shows that they just see each person as a valuable human being, and as long as they show forth in their character who they are, then they are well accepted here in the Wingman community, if that makes sense. So yeah, so just sum it up. I mean, once again, nothing explicit that has been done, but just living it out in kind of the everyday ordinary. They just realize that, there's no division or no room for division in the ministry that we have here. I view my role, I guess, in helping to promote racial conciliation kind of in the same light camp has been doing the whole time. Growing up, my parents always taught me to never focus on my skin color, just try and be the best person that I can be. Be intelligent when you play a sport, try to be the best that you can be. When you're in school, try to do the best that you can do. When you're at a job, all those things. And because they told me that if I were to focus on my skin color alone, I get so caught up in those thoughts that sometimes it holds me back from just simply putting my energies on trying to be the best person that I could be. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's what they taught me. So I kind of continue that same thing to where there's no explicit focus that I put on it other than just trying to be exceptional in any way that I can be, and hoping that people can see that that there's value in all people, and just kind of doing it one person at a time. And I teach that same thing to my sons. I have 2 boys, and as they're growing older, I'm wanting them to know to put all your energies on trying to be the best person that you can be, by trying to make a massive difference in that way, so that we can show that we are worth everything that everybody else is, if that makes sense. So our entire program, is centered around youth. It's a youth organization. So on top of ministering and serving the youth in our diocese, one of the big things about us is we are all about building up future leaders. So our entire program is set up to help them grow as they from campers to CITs, which is counselors in training. So they have an opportunity, if they show that they are exceptional and work hard and have good moral character, then we invite them to be a counselor in training, where they come back to camp for 1 week free of charge in a leadership role. And individuals who are counselors in training, we begin to look at them more closely and start inviting those who have shown that, man, they really are real leaders. We invite them to be junior counselors, and so they actually stay for the entire summer as paid staff as a junior counselor, where they learn the ropes to where they eventually, those who really show that they are exceptional, get moved up to senior counselors and eventually assistant directors. And so, we have this whole platform set up that where we, help youth kind of grow into the leaders that we have in our churches today. And even now, so many of the events and activities that we throw, a lot of our event coordinators and so on are previous campers, staff and alumni who have been here, and they give back their time and their talent to ensuring that the youth today are still getting that same quality Christian education that they've got when they were here. So yeah, we really do try to encourage growth within our youth, and that's how we involve them in our program. It's 100% a youth focused program.
My name is Avery Lewis. I am 17 and I'm a senior at Lake Brantley High School. I've been going to church since about third grade, since I was around eight or nine. So been going to church for a while now. Yeah.
Okay. And just so that we know, the church that you've been going to is?
St. John the Baptist Episcopal Church in Orlando, Florida.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. And Avery, what are the kind of things that you're involved in school, and that you do to keep your interest?
Since middle school, I've been in band. I played trombone, and I was section leader this past year for marching season. And now I'm in drama. I've always wanted to do drama, but I've just now kind of started to take it up. And we're putting on a musical in April.
Oh, great. Okay. And from what I understand, you're also constructing some of the sets for the play, right?
Well, yeah, we all got to pitch in and help put it together. But yeah, I've helped with that.
Okay, great. Now, you said that you'd been involved, in the church since about third grade?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what are the kind of things that, when you were involved in the church, that got you interested in staying in church? Because a lot of young people wind up dropping out of church. So what kept you involved?
Well, I was with my grandma one Sunday. Up until that point, I had never really gone very often, and I saw people carrying torches and the cross and stuff, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. And so the very next week, my grandmother she got me a robe, and I was an acolyte.
Oh, okay.
And I've been doing that. I did that for a while, and then I kind of been moving up. So now I'm a Eucharistic minister. I give communion.
Oh, very good. Very good. Just to wind back, when you said you saw people carrying torches, was that during, as far as you remember it, was that during Lent, or do you remember what?
No, it was just it was just a church service. It was just a normal church service. And
Okay.
they were just doing their procession, what they usually do. And
Oh, during the processions with the candles.
yeah, and
Okay.
I was like, oh, well, that looks cool. So I wanted to do it.
Okay, very good. Well, that's one of the ways that sometimes youth get involved with church. Now, understand that you've had some other activities, and just tell me a little bit about that. I believe you're going to Camp Wingman at one point, and that you'd been involved in UBE.
Oh, yeah. So being able to come to this church has been good because they've been able to send me to Camp Wingman almost every year since sixth grade. I think I missed 1 year, but they've paid for me every other year. And this summer, actually, I'm actually going to be a counselor. I'm going to go to that camp and get paid.
Oh,
Yeah,
great!
to be a summer camp counselor. So that's exciting. I can't wait. And with UBE, a couple years ago, I went to the national convention in New Jersey, and that was my first time going, and it was just a really fun, experience. Especially, I was with the youth the whole time, so it's really cool to be with people that were my age, and then the next year. It was held in the Bahamas. I think it was the 50th anniversary. It was an anniversary. It was one of the big anniversaries, and so they had it in the Bahamas. And that was also just a really fun experience. Fortunately, I wasn't able to go this past year.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was really fun, really good experience.
Right. So those are the things that also help keep your interest in church and also in efforts with the youth involvement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Now, one of the things that this webinar is about is the youth and the beloved community. And in terms of the beloved community, it's an attempt to bridge some of the racial divides that we have. And could you just tell me a little bit about what your experience has been with either racial reconciliation or racial divisions?
I don't, for the most part, me going to school, I've not always, but when I switched middle schools in sixth grade, when I went to a different county, all of us, my middle school became, predominantly white, and that was kind of like an adjustment, and I've kind of just like grown with that, I guess. Hopefully, when I go to college, I'll be going to an HBCU though, not because so I can be around my people that I can relate with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you touched on something very interesting. As you said, your people that you can relate with. It seems like you've adjusted to being in what sounds like a predominantly a white environment. Okay. And has that created any tensions for you, or or any opportunities for bridging those racial gaps?
I guess black people and white people, of course, we have many similarities, but there's also we are different. So just things as simple as the culture and viewpoints and stuff. And it used in middle school, I used to I wouldn't be able to get along with anybody because I couldn't agree with them, but I had to kind of get past that because I knew my family wouldn't be moving anytime soon or anything. So I said, I'll just keep my comments to myself, for the most part. And I think that's why I want to go to a HBCU, so I can be around more like-minded people as well.
Okay. And what are the things that you feel that you'd like to gain, as you said, being around your people, and also what would you like to gain, especially in having experience like a Camp Wingman, that's a multicultural setting? What would you look forward to, or what would really kind of make the experience special for you?
Most of my family graduated from an HBCU, and they've told me how in that environment, the professors, are more caring. It's more of a family type situation. they care. They kind of care more than they would at like a PWI. My dad especially, because he went to Bethune-Cookman, and then he went to UCF and finished his schooling there. And so he told me that it really is a big difference. And also there's a lot of culture to be experienced by going to an HBCU that I haven't really gotten anywhere else so far.
Oh, okay, very good. Now you're gonna have to translate for me. What is a PWI?
A predominantly white institution.
Okay, very good. It's interesting. I hadn't heard the term used in that instance, but
Oh, really?
yeah, but you're right on the money. Now, one of the other things, is that what would you say, for youth coming up, like a young man like you or young woman, what would be useful or you feel helpful in attracting that young person to church, to a church, or to the Episcopal Church?
The Episcopal Church is really, rooted in tradition and all of that. And that's good, but that might not translate to younger people. So I'm not saying to change everything, but maybe adjust with the times a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And in changing with the times, what are the things that you think might be helpful in those changes?
I'd say maybe incorporating more, technology with the church. One thing, it's not one of the greatest things in our society, but it can be used to our advantage, is social media.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of churches, a lot of businesses and everything, they have accounts on social media, because that's really where everyone is now.
Mm-hmm.
Showcasing what activities might be going on, or even just saying, today was a good Sunday, in our service, or promoting upcoming events, stuff like that can really bring people in.
Okay, very good. And as a takeaway, if you were to give a message to older folks or to the leadership of the church in terms of how to attract or keep young people in the church, what would that message be?
I still think it's like kind of tradition, because older people, they kind of get caught up, in the good old days. It's not the good. We can't think about the good old days anymore. We got to think more about today, and that's just a big setback. We always got to be moving forward and progressing, instead of being stagnant, staying in one place.
Okay, so adjusting to the times. Okay, great. Okay, Avery, thanks so much for this interview with you. And what I'd like to ask you, are there any final thoughts that you have that you'd like to share, with the audience?
Being in the church, for this long has been such a, rewarding experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of grown up, in this church, and worked my way up, and it's just granted me so many opportunities, and really it's gotten me this job at Camp Wingman, pretty much.
Okay.
So yeah, I owe a lot to the Episcopal Church, but especially to my home church, St. John's.
Okay, very good. Well, we look forward to you being at Camp Wingman, and even further continuing to be part of St. John the Baptist Church in Orlando. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank our youth participant, Avery Lewis, for his perspective as a young person who is growing in faith and growing in realizing that truly with the unity, there can be diversity, and that we can continue to move towards the beloved community. Thank you, and join us in the near future for our other broadcasts. If you'd like to get more information, you can contact me, Dr. John Robertson, at either phone number 407-340-8292, or at my email, drjohnr1@bellsouth.net. Thank you, peace, blessings, and love. Good night.